The forest crouched beneath a sheet of crystalline fog. Every branch bowed under the weight of cold that seemed almost sentient. Sergeant Vale lay motionless among the frost-coated roots. His form blended so completely into the terrain that even the slightest shift could betray him. He steadied his breathing, letting the bitter air fill and empty his lungs in a controlled rhythm. This moon demanded silence from all who stepped upon it, and Vale obeyed with the discipline of someone who understood that noise could be a death sentence. He was here by necessity, not recognition, and certainly not for the approval of the Galactic Coalition soldiers who marched clumsily behind him. Their armor clanged in dull metallic notes, each footfall a small outrage against the stillness of the land. The squad's overlapping voices crackled through the comms, carrying skepticism coated in thinly veiled disdain. Human reflexes are notoriously insufficient for precision work, one muttered. Another snorted, command must be desperate if they think primitive eyesight can outperform tactical augmentation. Vale had heard variations of the same sentiment since joining the coalition war effort, yet he gave the words no more attention than he did the drifting flakes of frost. He shifted slightly, adjusting the analog scope mounted atop his rifle. It was a tool considered archaic by most modern militaries, but its simplicity made it uniquely reliable on this world. Electromagnetic interference scrambled advanced optics, not glass and steel. Through his lens, the forest unfolded in muted shades, revealing the smallest imbalances, a strip of bark sheared too cleanly, a patch of snow unsettled by something other than wind. These inconsistencies whispered one truth. Korth scouts had already surveyed this ground. The reptilian sharpshooters thrived in environments like this, where cloaks bent light and sound into weapons. A clipped order crackled through the channel. Team, maintain formation. Human, report forward visibility. The commander's tone held restraint, but not trust. Vale studied the clearing ahead, noting a faint distortion curling through the air. It pulsed subtly, like heat rising from stone, except there was no warmth here. He knew what it signified. Korth presence, he murmured. 3, possibly 4 ahead. They're stationary. The squad halted. Sensors hummed, scanned, and returned nothing. A scoff followed. He's guessing, someone whispered. Vale ignored the remark. His job was not to convince them. It was to keep them alive. He tightened his grip on the rifle, letting the cold bite into his palms. There was clarity in discomfort, a sharpening of instincts he trusted more than any augmentation. Another distortion flickered at the edge of his vision, confirming his suspicion. The Korth were watching, waiting for overconfident prey to step into the kill zone. Vale had no intention of obliging them. He leaned closer to the earth, aligning his shot with a patch of empty air that wasn't truly empty. His voice remained steady. Advise holding position. They're ready to strike. The commander hesitated, weighing data against intuition. Team, stay put, he ordered. A brief, tense silence settled over the squad. Vale felt their unease, their disbelief, their reliance growing despite themselves. The forest held its breath with them. Then he saw the slightest ripple. Confirmation. He exhaled, letting purpose sharpen every thought. Contact imminent, he whispered. And they know we're here. The first shot fractured the silence like a blade drawn across glass. Vale felt the recoil travel through his arms, a familiar pulse that anchored him to the frozen earth. Ahead, a shimmer twisted violently, then collapsed as a Korth sharpshooter decloaked in death. Its armored body struck the snow with a muted thud, the camouflage flickering out like a dying flame. The coalition soldiers around him tensed, startled by the suddenness of the kill. Their sensors had detected nothing. Vale had seen everything. A barrage of plasma flechettes streaked through the trees in retaliation, carving luminous arcs through the mist. The squad dove for cover, their earlier bravado evaporating into panicked shouts. Vale remained where he was, adjusting his sight with deliberate calm. The Korth were repositioning, using the confusion to encircle the team. He listened to the cadence of their shots, each burst revealing a fragment of their formation. They were disciplined, but their rhythm betrayed urgency. They had not expected resistance from a lone human. A deep, guttural voice crackled through the comms. "Human, how did you see that target?" It belonged to Threx, a broad-shouldered Dathran who had mocked Vale the loudest. Now his tone carried something close to fear. Vale ignored the question for the moment, focusing instead on the patterns of displacement drifting through the fog. Every cloaked Korth disturbed the frost subtly, a ripple of air that broke the forest's fragile stillness. The trick was to catch the world in the act of lying. "3 more, Vale murmured. "Left ridge." The commander hesitated. "Confirm." Vale fired before the order was given. Another distortion crumpled. The aliens gasped. Threx snarled in disbelief. No implant could process that quickly. "I don't use implants," Vale replied. "Then what?" "Practice." The simplicity of the answer frustrated them, but it was the truth. Humanity had never relied on perfect perception. It had thrived on imperfect worlds. Instinct was their inheritance, honed through millennia of uncertainty and conflict. Vale felt that lineage alive in him now, steadying his breath as the forest erupted in more hostile fire. A plasma bolt struck a nearby trunk, showering him with splinters of glowing bark. Vale rolled to a new vantage point, ribs protesting against the freezing ground. He raised his rifle with fluid precision. The third Korth revealed itself through a faint tremor in a branch. He squeezed the trigger. Another corpse hit the snow. The comms fell into stunned silence before a younger alien voice whispered, "How does he keep doing that?" No sarcasm, no mockery, just awe. Vale didn't relish it. He needed them focused. "They're moving to higher perches," he warned. "If they get elevation, they'll pin us." The commander reacted swiftly. "Coalition team, anchor positions. Follow the humans' cues." It was the first time he had acknowledged Vale's expertise openly. Vale marked new angles, guiding the squad without looking away from his scope. The aliens adapted quickly, adjusting their stances, their fire patterns, their confidence. Even Threx followed orders without a complaint. A faint resonance echoed through the clearing, a Korth signal, sharp and urgent. Vale recognized desperation in the sound. They were losing control of the engagement. He sighted 2 new distortions gliding through the trees. The Korth were trying to flank for a kill stroke. Not today. He fired twice in rapid succession, the shots threading through the frigid air with surgical precision. 2 cloaks flickered violently, collapsing into dark shapes on the snow. The forest fell quiet except for the ragged breathing of the coalition soldiers. For the first time, Threx spoke without contempt. "Human, what else can you see?" Vale scanned the stillness. His breath frosted the scope. "More," he said softly. "They're not done yet." The forest trembled with a new, heavier resonance, a low vibration that crawled along the frozen trunks and settled uneasily into the bones of every soldier present. Vale recognized the shift immediately. The Korth were no longer probing. They were preparing a coordinated counterattack. He steadied his breathing and surveyed the treetops, watching for the smallest sign of movement. Around him, the coalition team reorganized, no longer dismissive or complacent. Their earlier mockery had dissolved into a wary dependence, shaped by the rhythm of his commands and the precision of his shots. A cluster of pale drones emerged through the fog, their wings beating in tight, synchronized patterns. The machines deployed webs of refracted light that warped the environment, distorting angles and creating false silhouettes among the trees. Several aliens cursed under their breath as their sensors flashed contradictory readings. Vale tracked the drones not by their deceptive projections, but by the shadows they failed to mimic. Every false image they produced had an absence behind it, a hollow space untouched by natural light. Those gaps guided his aim more reliably than any digital overlay. "Drones moving toward your flank," he called, directing Threx and another soldier to shift their positions. The Dathran obeyed without protest, crashing through the frost to intercept. Moments later, their weapons discharged in crackling bursts, bringing down 2 of the drones. The remaining machines veered sharply, adjusting their patterns in real time. Vale fired at a third drone, clipping its pivot wing and sending it spiraling into a tree with a metallic shriek. The comms erupted with overlapping questions, but Vale cut through them with terse clarity. The Korth are adjusting. They'll strike from elevation now. The commander acknowledged him with a curt nod, silently conceding that the human understood this battlefield better than anyone else. Vale didn't savor the recognition. He simply used it. His voice became the stabilizing force holding the team together, guiding their movements with efficient precision. Above, hidden among frost-laden branches, several Korth sharpshooters deployed heat distortion traps, floating orbs that redistributed thermal signatures through the air. They made it nearly impossible for coalition algorithms to calculate enemy locations. Vale ignored the traps and focused on the real enemy. The slight rhythmic sway of branches, the irregular pressure of weight against fragile limbs. Those tiny imbalances betrayed positions that technology could not disguise. He absorbed the information unconsciously, instinct weaving it into a map of threats and opportunities. 3 targets high, he murmured, spread across the arc. He fired once, and a reptilian form tumbled through the frost. Coalition rifles followed his callouts, dropping the remaining ambushers with newfound synchronicity. A surge of confidence rippled through the squad as they realized they could anticipate Vale's thinking, at least partially. Threx barked a triumphant shout, more exhilarated than mocking, and the others responded in kind. The Korth resistance weakened, but their psychological pressure shifted. Vale heard faint transmissions carried by the wind, Korth frequencies shaking with fear. They whispered about a phantom hunter, an unseen predator capable of piercing their most sophisticated concealment. The myths grew with every body that hit the snow. Vale allowed the fear to spread, knowing it would erode their coordination faster than bullets. Still, the conflict was far from over. The forest had grown too quiet, the kind of silence that suggested strategic withdrawal rather than surrender. Vale scanned the ridgeline, sensing a gathering tension just beyond visibility. The Korth were reorganizing, consolidating their strength for a decisive strike. His muscles tightened, not with fear but readiness. "We've turned the tide," the commander said cautiously, "but something else is coming." Vale kept his eye on the horizon. "Yes," he answered, voice low and steady. "Their real leader hasn't shown himself yet." A tremor rippled through the air, faint yet unmistakable, as though the forest itself braced for something colossal. Vale lifted his head slightly, sensing the shift before any sound confirmed it. The Korth commander entered the battlefield with deliberate, predatory strides, its silhouette bending light around a shell of adaptive armor. The creature moved like a phantom wrapped in arrogance and fury, its cloak oscillating between visibility and perfect absence. Even without seeing it fully, Vale felt its presence, heavy, calculating, ancient in its efficiency. This was no ordinary sharpshooter. This was the architect behind the ambush, the last obstacle standing between the coalition squad and survival. The commander's drones preceded it like silent heralds, gliding through the frost with unnerving precision. They released strands of sensor hijacking interference that crackled faintly against the snow. Coalition readings collapsed into static. The soldiers tensed, gripping their weapons in a futile attempt to decipher the chaos swirling around them. Vale steadied his rifle, tuning out the electronic storm that flooded his comms. He trusted what he could see and what he could intuit. The natural world still spoke clearly if one knew how to listen. The faintest indentation in a nearby branch caught his eye, subtle enough that most would ignore it. But Vale recognized the sign of deliberate weight distribution, a practiced hunter shifting quietly into a superior position. He whispered coordinates to the commander, guiding the squad to spread and lower their profiles. Despite their fear, they followed without hesitation. Their survival depended on it. A sudden flash tore through the mist as the Korth commander fired a bolt of plasma that screamed past Vale's head, vaporizing a chunk of bark behind him. He rolled instinctively, relocating before the creature recalibrated its aim. The Korth moved with predatory elegance, never lingering long enough for sensors to catch it. Vale tracked the pattern of its displacements, each movement creating a disruption in the thermal haze, each shot accompanied by a fractional flick of its cloak. These fractures in its concealment were microscopic, but they were all he needed. "You can't outrun it," Threx bellowed, ducking behind a half-shattered trunk. His panic was real, but not paralyzing. He had learned to trust Vale's impossible calm. Vale exhaled slowly. "I don't intend to outrun it." The commander lunged, firing twice more while leaping between elevated perches. The ground shuddered beneath its weight. Vale's focus narrowed into a cold, precise tunnel. He studied the wind curling through the trees, the drifting frost, the sudden absence of falling snowflakes where the creature's heat distorted the air. Every clue aligned like planets in orbit, forming a single, perfect firing solution in his mind. He shifted the rifle, letting the muzzle settle against the frozen earth to stabilize the shot. The world grew silent again, holding its breath with him. He squeezed the trigger. The crack echoed like a decisive verdict. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the Korth commander faltered mid-leap, its cloak shattering into a cascade of sparks as a single round pierced the narrow gap at its throat. The creature crashed to the ground in a violent convulsion, its limbs clawing at the snow before falling still. The remaining Korth soldiers, stripped of leadership and morale, scattered into the forest, their resolve collapsing into primal fear. Silence reclaimed the clearing, broken only by the hushed awe of the coalition troops. Threx approached Vale slowly, as if nearing a dangerous animal. His voice, when he spoke, carried a respect he had never offered before. "Human, you ended a legend." Vale rose carefully, brushing frost from his gloves. "Legends fall like anything else," he answered. He surveyed the quieted forest, then added, "But the rumors that follow them last longer." The commander stepped forward, nodding once. "We will need those rumors, and we will need you." Vale didn't smile, but something softened in his expression. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and turned toward the distant ridgeline, where the mist seemed to shift with new possibilities. "Then let's make sure the next fight is one we choose."